topic for this particular session is going to be covering off on how you can look to adapt, change, and create ultimately different merchandising strategies, and using data at the core of that to drive those different strategies. So with that, what we'll be covering off on the agenda today is I'll go ahead and start with introductions. We'll jump into kind of how Looker can help with your own merchandising today. Some different use cases, right, as far as how we've seen folks leverage Looker, and what they've been able to use to address that. Then we'll jump into, what some of these examples of these strategies are. We'll jump into a demo, right? So we'll be able to actually show you this in action. And then we'll leave time at the end to cover off on some customer stories, but more importantly, for question and answers at the end. So feel free to use the chat box available to you to ask any questions. We'll try to get through as many as we can, whether it be having our analysts answering some of those on the line, as well as, in the end with our live Q&A, we'll definitely leave time to get through as many as we can today. So with that, a quick introduction here. So my name is Justin Powell. I am one of the sales engineers here at Looker at Google. I've been here about 2.5 years, covering a few areas between New York, Latin America, and Canada, but definitely worked with quite a few folks in the e-commerce and retail space. So just as a quick introduction, right? So what we'll be covering off on today, and this will be kind of helping you drive recommendations or understandings of how you should be kind of targeting these 3 areas, right? So the first of, setting different price points available for your different products. The second one is going to be looking at marketing strategies, right? So making a determination of what products you should be leading with, that can drive kind of a lot of different purchases or increase basket value, right, for a lot of your end users, as well as determinations of what you should be looking at as far as offering different discounts or coupons. These ideas inherently in themselves aren't necessarily net new, but really where we've seen people take this idea of recommendations or pricing, or product bundles to the next level, right, is if you're able to enable, say, a sales representative in your brick and mortar retail store, where you can imagine a workflow where a customer may come to them with a particular item. They might be able to scan the barcode for that item, and immediately what would pop up on their screen would be a recommendation of a few other items that they should perhaps be recommending to the customer to really be able to drive kind of increased sales through things like an affinity analysis. But really for your retail reps on the floor, right, they'll have this seamless experience where they can start to offer these real-time recommendations to your customers. So really taking the best of both worlds of the online experience, where it's very simple to provide those recommendations, but now providing a human element to that, to folks enabled in the store themselves, to be able to drive a lot of these increases. And ultimately in the end, right, you'll see how we'll be provided these different tools, as well as what we call Looker blocks, right, specifically around affinity analyses as one example, to help you kind of identify and start to address some of these different areas internally within your organization. So at a super high level, right, these are kind of going to be 3 samples of different key use cases that we see folks tackle, and we'll actually be touching on some of these specific use cases when we actually jump into the Looker instance. The first one is going to be driving high margin baskets, right? So how do you increase that average order value for all of the customers coming into your store to increase the purchases or number of items, or convincing them to purchase more high value items for that matter, right? So being able to look at data and be able to analyze those different components. The second one is going to be looking at how you can start to bundle these products together, right? So what products sell really well together, whether you start offering them as bundles online, whether you start placing them next to each other within the store, right? So a lot of different ways that you can start to use these different pieces of data and information. And then the last one being kind of this omni-channel, right? So stores these days obviously are selling their items in multiple different places and in different ways. So being able to analyze all of your sales results co-located within one location, right? And being able to see how channels are performing against one another, but then ultimately, driving towards specific strategies for those channels, as well as applying other factors of regionality, age groups, right? Being able to freely slice and dice your data to be able to build that more comprehensive picture so that you can be a lot smarter and ultimately more targeted with the customer experience that you're providing to your retail customers in the store or online. So one of the pieces that I've kind of been touching on here is this idea of this affinity analysis block. So taking a step back for those that are unfamiliar with blocks, these are going to be essentially pre-templatized LookML. So we have common data patterns for different ways people are going to be analyzing their data, one of which is going to be conducting an affinity analysis. So we've really created a starting point for you and team to be able to leverage this block to be able to quickly deliver value against this particular type of analysis, right? So the idea here is you're not starting from scratch, but you're able to get much faster to a point where you can now provide access to your internal users, the ability to run these affinity analysis, right? And a couple of different things that these analyses out of the box allow you to do, right, is the first one being able to identify, popular products, right, that are attached to a lot of these different sales. Determine the lift, right, that would occur from actually bundling these different products together, right? And imagine that you receive a lift from product B by bundling with product A, right? In that case, you might be willing to discount these two products to drive an overall larger basket size. Identifying, as I mentioned, a lot of these different promotional opportunities. And then the last one, right? And the flip side of all of this, being able to determine what are opportunities for items that we should just remove altogether or completely, right? They haven't sold, they don't drive basket size, or any of these loyalty, right? So in many senses, it probably is in our best interest to actually just get rid of these products altogether. So with that, I will actually jump into a demo where you'll actually be able to see this in action, an example of these different analyses available to you. So if you just give me 1 second here, I can share my screen for the Looker demo. So this is going to be where we will jump into a affinity analysis. So just as a quick refresher for folks that may be unfamiliar with Looker, right? They're going to be kind of these tabs here at the top. And really what we'll concentrate on today are going to be 2 key areas. The first one is going to be browse. So we'll be looking at a dashboard for an affinity analysis that we'll use as a starting point. But then we'll also jump into our explore, right, which is kind of our self-service environment, to be able to start to slice and dice the data further to determine and derive additional insights on top of what the dashboard itself already provides. So what I'll do here is I will actually jump down to one of our boards here, looking at our retail dashboards, and I'll come down and I will actually navigate to our item affinity analysis. So I will open this up in a new tab, and we will use this as a starting point. So this is going to be our affinity analysis dashboard, right? And immediately here at the top, we can start to view the different items that we're selling, but we can actually see them cut by 2 factors here on the right-hand side, right? So we can see these bullet points plotted by the order count along the x-axis, as well as the average rest of basket margin on the y-axis, right? So what we can essentially look at this is going to be, what are our products here that are selling a lot? So we can see that there are a number of items here that we've sold quite a few times. What we can also see though is that, as a part of the basket, these are a relatively low portion of the overall basket margin, right? So it might make sense for us to start to pair some of these items with some of our more high value items to increase that margin against each basket, right? And some of those items that we can potentially be pairing with will be kind of some of these items here in the top left quadrant here, right? So these items represent ones that haven't sold particularly large quantities, but of the ones that are selling, there's a huge margin to be made against these, right? So these are probably ones that are great opportunity for us to help make a determination of how we should actually be bundling these items here to see how we can actually increase the amount of these particular items that we're selling, right? And here we can actually see what those products are, right? So one example here, even this one here at the top, is going to be this, the scarf that we have available, where it's fantastic margin for us. But as we saw on the right-hand side, right, the count of number of items sold is relatively low. So what we were able to do here is we can actually click this button here and we can jump to a dashboard where we can focus on that particular item. And we can actually be able to come down here to see that item here kind of in the filter value up here for the one that we want to focus on. So here we can see kind of what are the best products to actually bundle with this actual product here. So here we can see now a list of product B items, right? So items that pair really well with that scarf. And we can also see what the projected lift would be associated with each one of these particular items, right? As well as, taking this assumption that we get a 10% uptake from each one of these top 5 items, that what is the overall uplift from a dollars and cents perspective that we can imagine taking away from pairing these items with one another and seeing that increase in sales. So immediately from here, right, once we have our focus item that we want to use as our starting point, we can quickly and easily be able to start to view some of these different items that we should be pairing this with, right? So we can see that actually these Ray-Ban sunglasses are a fantastic option to pair with that, because not only are we getting a huge lift, right, but we can see that there is a large frequency, right, of these particular items being sold. So definitely a ton of opportunity for us to start to attach these different items together, whether that be done online or in store, right? And this really connects back to that previous example that I had shared, right? Where we can imagine this same experience existing for that retail rep that scanned that scarf as far as that barcode and are immediately given this list of these 5 particular items pair really, really well with that scarf. So a simple and easy way for you to start to derive immediate insights, but ultimately making sure that those insights are actionable, right? That you can start to take away something from those to take some action against your actual overall strategy. So even if we come back up here, right, and we start to look where we started concentrating mostly on this kind of upper left-hand quadrant here, that perhaps we want to take a look at this lower right-hand quadrant down here, right? So to be able to do that, what we can actually do here is that we can actually click these 3 dots here at the top and jump to our Explore environment, right? And what this will do is this will actually open up a brand new tab for us where what we can do, right, is we can use these particular sunglasses and once again, provide this as a filter value for us here at the top. So I can rerun this where we should only see our Ray-Bans being returned as the single line here. But ultimately what we really want to do with this, right, is once again, making a determination of what other items we should be pairing with these sunglasses, right? So if I actually go ahead and I remove all of the information associated with product A, right, and we can actually start to pull in information for what we should sell alongside it, right? So here we can see on the left-hand side, we have all of these additional fields available to us. So I will just collapse product A and we will actually pull in product B, right? So with product B, we'll want to see what lift we can expect with product B, as well as in that same vein, right? What we can see is the average basket, the average rest of basket margin, right? So we can pull those 2 fields in. We can simply hide this from the visualization, and then we can hit run. So we can actually see these points plotted on that same similar scatter plot that we've been looking at of the particular items that we can now see would pair particularly well with these Wayfair sunglasses here. And that's where we can see kind of a number of products here that would see kind of a pretty substantial lift here on the right-hand side, where we can actually see if we go ahead and, we go ahead and run this again. I was waiting to populate there. We can actually see this sorted, so we can see, there's probably an opportunity for us to pair these sunglasses with either this French purse or even this beanie, right? Where it provides a healthy amount of lift as well as the rest, the basket margin as well, to increase our overall kind of basket size, right? With the conjunction of these two components here. And with that, right, we can make a determination that, hey, if we go ahead and bundle these two items together and we see this lift and increase in our overall actual um, basket size, that perhaps we can start to incentivize customers by providing a discount or a coupon against these items themselves. So a lot of ways where you can really start to use kind of this dashboard as that starting point, but then you can ultimately dive always deeper into these actual explore environments to derive those additional insights. So if we jump back to our dashboard here, right, and we come down to the last section down here, we can ultimately see what we mentioned before as the last point, right, as this product rationalization, right? So meaning we can see there's a lot of red here, meaning these are products that we can see just from the number wise that these basic leggings really don't sell very often. And even as far as the basket margin goes, it's actually pretty low. Um, so it might make sense for us to actually go through this particular list and actually start to remove some of these items from our offering, right? So we can easily interact with these, we can sort on these different numbers here, and be able to make a determination, right, against these different metrics around how we're driving that strategy and ultimately making sure that everything that we're offering is going to be ones that are actually selling or are going to be sold. So through this example, right, you can really see at a high level how something as simple as this affinity analysis metrics can already out of the box provide a ton of different ways that you can start to slice and dice these different metrics that you're going to be looking at to start to give and deliver insights that people can start to immediately action upon and against. So with that, I will quickly jump back to our actual slide deck here. So what I'll do to round this out is bring this full circle as far as sharing some stories from customers, as far as how they themselves have been able to ultimately leverage this affinity analysis to their own advantage. So the first one here is a company, Dollar Shave Club. So for those familiar with them, they essentially are a subscription service for razor blades, as well as other kind of items associated with shaving. So like shaving cream, um, shaving oil, all that good stuff. And one of the kind of goals that they had, right, was how they can start to send samples to customers to increase their overall sales. Um, Obviously, the difficulty with just sending samples and testing that out is that that can be super expensive, right? With simply just having different groups and starting to produce a ton of samples to send to customers on that free basis. So what they did, right, is they wanted to actually take a look and see what items actually sold really well with our actual razors and razor blades, right? And through that, they were able to see through their affinity analysis that the shave butter specifically actually sold really well with the actual razors, right? So that allowed them to target that specific item as the sample that they should be um, using to actually entice individuals to convert and ultimately purchase items through their website. And you can see here, right, they saw an 100% ROI through that particular program. So it was definitely a highly successful one for them on their end. The second one here is going to be for a company called Tuft and Needle. And what Tuft and Needle is, they are a direct-to-consumer mattress company, and they sell other ancillary items, kind of like bed sheets, pillows, etc. And you can see that they also sell these through kind of these different channels, right? So they have these different channels that they can ultimately reach their customers through. So what they really wanted to make sure, right, is say we bring our Amazon sales online or run a promotion through Amazon, right? we don't want that to actually be cannibalizing any of our other any of our revenue from any of our other channels, right? So we don't want to see a huge increase in Amazon sales and that totally tank our you know our online shop sales or our brick and mortar sales, right? Ideally, we want the tide to raise all of the boats, right, together as one. Um, so what they did, right, is they ultimately were able to run experiments to see how, right, these investments are affecting Amazon, but not in that silo in and of itself, but amongst the context of their in-store and web sales as well. So being able to look at their data, not necessarily in each individual silo, right, where you might be able to log into the Amazon store, see that information, your POS system data, and then your online store data. But ultimately, right, the benefit here is being able to see all of that data co-located in one place so that they can see how the effects, how they have effects upon one another here. Um, so what they saw kind of by having access to that dashboard, right, is that running these promotions on Amazon didn't affect their other sales. So that allowed them, right, to understand that pushing these marketing strategies or sales through that specific channel, right, is actually beneficial to their overall sales and not looking at this within the silos of themselves, right? You oftentimes see different companies have your different channel owners where, in that situation, if they're all working within their own reports themselves, right, Amazon owner might say, great, I've done a fantastic job, where they may not see the other actual effects downstream for some of these other folks. So really being able to build that comprehensive overview, that 360-degree view, is going to be highly beneficial for you as a company, but ultimately also allowing you to be able to start at a very high level, right? In the example like Tuft and Needle, but even being able to take that the next step further, right? And similar to this affinity analysis we've shown, right? Where you can even start to make a determination within those specific channels, right? What should we be bundling together? What items should we be removing and rationalizing altogether in these different areas as well? So with that, I will leave some time here at the end, kind of as I mentioned, for some questions and answers. So I appreciate you all including all of the questions here along the side. And I will actually start to pull those up and see how many we can get through, and hopefully we can get through the majority of them here. So the first question I see here is this functionality native to Looker, and how much work goes into building this type of analysis? So great question. And to address that first part, right? So everything that I showed you today is going to be the native functionality of Looker, right? So everything was done inside of that instance. The second piece, as far as how much work goes into building this type of analysis, the great thing here is that the affinity analysis block gets you a large part of the way there, right? So a lot of that initial legwork has already been done on your behalf. So as I mentioned earlier, right, for folks that are interested in actually getting your hands on the experience of implementing this block on your own, I highly recommend that you attend the follow-up session later, where we actually have a hands-on lab where you'll actually be able to go through the experience of implementing this affinity analysis block on your own, as well as we'll have one of our analysts walking you through the experience of what it's like to actually customize and tailor this so that it can actually fit your own company's needs. The second question that I see here is that the product segmentation scatter plots are useful. How did I actually build those? So you saw in that example, right, that we had the scatter plots available obviously on the dashboard, but it was actually in that explore environment, right, where you saw where I was able to click and add those different fields that we were able to easily build those scatter plots, right? So the tiles on the dashboards themselves were actually originally built inside of that explore environment. So that's always going to be your starting point for building those initial tiles that you can then ultimately save to a dashboard. The second one, third one here is how do I install the affinity analysis block? So touching back to that first point, right? You can go through the hands-on lab. We also have a link. So for those that haven't actually looked at it before, we actually have an entire directory of Looker blocks. Um, these are all going to range from, common analytical patterns, common data sources that we've seen, different visualizations or even data sets, right, that are all publicly available to you. So this isn't like an additional kind of add-on to your Looker instance or anything like that. These are all kind of public-facing material that you can easily leverage later today, even after this session, right? And immediately implement that into your own instance. The other one is, how hard is this to implement? So I think I've touched on that a little bit already, so no need to be redundant there around the points that I've already made. Another one here is, can I adapt this to my personal business? So absolutely, right? So the idea here is that this affinity analysis block is really just a starting point for you and your company, right? So we completely understand every business is going to be a little bit different in terms of kind of what you define as your strategy, what you're starting to look at, or even, maybe you want to pair this data along with your marketing data, right? To see kind of for marketing, are we actually driving bundles, seeing increase or movements as far as the different products that we've gone ahead and marketed, right? So there's a ton of opportunity here to take what we provide to you as nothing more than simply just a starting point, and then you can continuously build on top of that, right? The idea here is this is simply just a way to supercharge those analytics and really getting you up and running a lot more quickly here in this particular environment. So, you know, I think we're coming up on time here, but I really appreciate everyone taking the time today. I hope that this was helpful, that there's something that you're able to take away from this session, and are feeling super motivated to implement the affinity analysis for yourselves into your own instance, and can immediately start to derive a lot of these insights on your own. And as I mentioned, feel free to check into that hands-on labs. And I appreciate you all taking the time out of your day today. And I hope everyone stays safe out there. Thanks.